So we previously were learning in our study of Tanya about this ahava, this love that comes b'Yerusha, it comes as an inheritance. And it's something remarkable, something that transcends the vicissitudes of time. And even though here we are, 3.5 millennia plus after the Avos, after the patriarchs and matriarchs lived, we still have this inheritance, this legacy, this ahava, this attraction. Somehow we're always drawn towards God and spirituality. So today we're going to talk about Shoirish Ahavazu. What's the root source? Where does this come from? And just saying it comes from God is not good enough. That's very general. So we have to give, like in Chassidus Chabad, we want to have a detailed explanation. What does that mean? That it comes. How does it come from God? In what way does it manifest itself within our neshama? And when you understand this, you have a new appreciation of who you are, you have a new appreciation of other Yidden, and you have a new appreciation of the bigger picture, as you'll see. So in order to properly understand what we're going to talk about in today's lesson, I think it's relevant for us to review for a moment the concept of the Esser Spheres. Now, this was in a previous class. We talked about the notion that there are 10 spheres, 10 different dimensions, if you will, in every single world. And those 10 different dimensions that are in every single world, so they're actually each comprised of 10. And we explained in detail in our previous class how ultimately you have a range of 10 times 10, which gives you 100. And then we talked about the range of worlds, a range of realities, created realities, starting from the world of Atzilus, to the world of Bria, to the world of Yetzirah and Asiya. So we have basically 40 spheres, or 40 dimensions. We have Chachma de Atzilus, and then the next step down level of Chachma de Yetzirah, Chachma de Bria, Chachma de Asiya, the Chachma in each of those worlds. And then there's also a notion that each one of those 10, as I says, is expanded by 10. So you really have a range of 400. That's the Jewish genome. We have to come from somewhere there, somewhere in that framework of 400 specific kinds or forms of spirituality and the root source of a neshama. You come somewhere in that chart. So the highest of the highest neshamas come from Chachma de Atzilus. That's the highest level of 400. The lowest of neshamas will come from Malchus de Asiya. So that's the lowest of the 10 levels, the 10th, the lowest madrega of the lowest madrega in the lowest world. Malchus de Asiya. Which would mean that we can have something called Pesha Yisrael. We could have people who behave in a very sinful and rebellious way. They ignore their higher calling. They don't live with a sense of commitment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu at all. And they're, on the contrary, they're Pesha Yisrael. They go against what Hashem wants. And then we could also have people who are totally clueless, totally inept when it comes to anything spiritual. They're Kal Shabakalim. They're the greatest of lightweights. The whole business means nothing to them. Not because they're bad or rebellious. They don't connect to any of it. It's totally beyond it. It's not somebody that speaks or means anything to them. Their spiritual sensitivity is at the lowest possible level of acuity. And all of us come from somewhere within that framework, because we all have a neshama de kedusha, so we have to come from somewhere within that framework. Now here's where it gets interesting. The Esser Spheres, the 10 Spheres, are discussed, generally speaking, in two different ways. There's something called Klipa. Klipa is the world of unholiness, metaphorized as a husk. Just like peels are necessary to preserve the fruit, the Klipa is necessary to preserve a greater perfection of reality. So in order for there to be righteousness, there has to be a possibility for evil. In order for there to be a revelatory divine experience, there has to be the possibility for divine concealment. So all of this is necessary. Now, the concept of Klipa then, the Esser Spheres have to be in Klipa also, because Esser Spheres, that's the amino acids, the basic building blocks of spiritual reality. So the Esser Spheres, as they are found within the framework of Klipa, each of the Esser Spheres is on its own. So Chachma only understands Chachma, and Bina only understands Bina, and Das only can relate to Das. And anything which is not within its frame, it has no need for, has no explanation, no understanding of, no appreciation for, no tolerance for. Whereas when we talk about the Eser Spheres, the way they exist within the realm of Kedusha, it's very different. Not only does each one not stand independently, but quite to the contrary, they're all amalgamated and interlocking. So they all coalesce and all come together. And this is a basic principle of something called hiskalulus. Hiskalulus means that there's a total mixing and melding. Nothing is on its own. Now, in some ways, this concept of klipa is preceded with the principle or idea of olam hatov, the world of chaos. So before Hashem created the linear, organized world, which is a world that's able to be sustained, Hashem first created a world of chaos. Whether this does or does not have anything to do with theories of astrophysics and explosions is anybody's guess. Nobody really knows. Maybe, could be not. It's not relevant, actually. At least not on a practical level. But what we do know is that initially the world was created in a manner of chaos. And chaos begins with arrogance. Chaos begins with total obsession with self. When you're obsessed with yourself, when you're not interlocking with anything else, you're not amalgamating, you're not working in tandem, in fusion, then what we have is the opposite of fusion. We have an explosion. Instead of things coming together, what happens essentially is that everything pulls apart. Now, because all of the Eser Spheres of Toyu could not appreciate, suffer, or tolerate anything other than they, each took it to the nth degree. And since everybody was going in a different direction, all these spheres went, it was impossible to have any kind of synergy or balance. And eventually, that entire universe, that entire reality, simply imploded or exploded, however you want to refer to it. What happens when there's an explosion? We got shrapnel, we have leftovers. These leftovers, this is the idea of the sparks. Those sparks of holiness, now from a world that was blown apart, now those sparks of holiness they get put back together. Enter our world, the world of tikkun, the world where things are fixed in a linear fashion, in a logical, rational fashion, where everything is interlocking and amalgamated, but at the same time, we have the heirs of tohu. We have to repair. The world of tikkun is tikkun because A, it's fixed. The world of tikkun is also tikkun because it's about fixing. We have to fix the past mistakes. We have to fix what went wrong in order to fully repair reality. And when reality is repaired on a spiritual level, then Mashiach comes. And this is the Lurianic principle of Tikkun Olam, which has nothing to do with social justice necessarily, or with global warming or other mishigas, every kind of nuance that gets perverted and twisted to fit somebody else's agenda, and they abuse Kabbalistic or holy spiritual terminology. That's the meaning of Tikkun Olam. The Arizal says, every time you make a bracha and you eat your food mindfully, and then you do something holy with it, you performed an act of tikkun olam, of repairing the world. Every time that you ate food, you did not make a bracha, you did not acknowledge its source, you did not acknowledge that it comes from God, and then you went ahead and did selfish, hedonistic, or maybe even evil things, you denigrated or further made the world broken.
The sparks are all different parts of the 10 spheres?
The sparks would come from the 10 spheres. We do not have the ability to identify which piece of shrapnel comes from what or from where.
So you have little sparks of Chachma, little sparks of
the sparks of everything. Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. But practically speaking, it doesn't make a difference to us. We don't intimately engage with the spark and have an argument, a conversation with him and say, since you're Chachma, let me put you back into Chachma. All we know is that physicality, the material world, is powered by godliness, and that God embedded these sparks of holiness in it, and when we are able to elevate those sparks, the world becomes a better place. When we finish doing our job, the world will be a perfect place. That's the coming of Mashiach. That's the Jewish nirvana, the idea of a perfected reality and existence. Incidentally, the world was built for that to begin with. It's not an anomaly. That's what the world was created for. That's why we have Bereshis Bara Elikim, to know that before we even look at creation, the first thing we should know is that it's a godly thing, not a random thing. Because if it's random, who says it can never be fixed? It's random. And you would be right. If it is random, nobody can tell you it can never be fixed. Maybe it can't be fixed. It's random. But if it's not random, if it's choreographed, then there has to be some kind of plan of action to be able to fix it. That plan of action is known as Torah and mitzvahs, in the vernacular Yiddishkeit. Now, these 10 spheres that function within the world of Tikkun, they all are able to come together for a greater purpose. In fact, they have no independent existence. None of these spheres say, well, I am. It's I am. It's all about we. They are the ultimate team. Where do we have an example within this? A healthy person's body is interlocking. Everything works together. the person's body, the nature of the body, the cellular structure of the body, or even the subatomic structure of the body, we don't have the hand saying, well, I want all the blood, I want the vitality, and the other hand is fighting for the blood, and the right hand fights with the left hand, and the eyes fight with the nose. It's ridiculous. Everything, the way Hashem built a human being, all of the cells are interlocking. What happens, Rahman al-Islam, when certain cells, something goes off in a cell, and the cell starts becoming selfish, and the cell starts to take care of its tiny reality without thinking of the bigger picture? That's called sickness. That's called ailment. And that disables functionality. Incidentally, the Alter Rebbe uses that exact metaphor to explain how when people are in a state of disunity, the result is that Klal Yisrael is unhealthy. Because there's this gestalt of Klal Yisrael, and when Klal Yisrael is considered like a big body, like a big goof, and when we have parts of the body that don't speak to other parts of the body, or actually fight other parts of the body, so then that's like obstructing the blood. It's like having an obstruction, chas v'shalom. It's like an artery that's clogged, and that's why we're not functioning so well.
So we were even a little on the sick side, even though we weren't in exile going back thousands of years ago. It was still that situation.
Been a little sick for a very long time. I mean, most people are a little sick all the time. You know, anybody who functions at perfect, within that 20 minutes of the baby's being born, he's starting to have mucus already. That's we're in our mother's womb, we're usually perfect, and after that, everything starts to go downhill from there, right? That's why it says Tinek mishanelad maskale is yabesh. A child, from the moment he's born, starts to go downhill, starts to dry out. What does that mean? The child gets stronger and stronger. A little child has no ability, no constitution. He can't absorb food. He has no koyach. He can't do anything for himself. He gets older and stronger. At least, according to Torah, at least till the age of 35, your strength is waxing, not waning. What do you mean, maschal is yabesh? What it means that there's a certain perfection of health, a perfect synergy and balance in the body that we're born with, but we start to lose immediately. And then we have to battle illness, and battle weaknesses, and battle challenges. The baby doesn't have. The baby's born perfect. Anyway, that's a subject for another day. So here's what's important to know. What's important to know is that when we speak about Eser Sfiros, we're not speaking about 10 independent entities who have struck some kind of peace treaty to get along. But we're talking about 10 things which are intrinsically one. There's different parts. The eye is an eye, the foot is a foot, the stomach is a stomach, etc. But the truth is that it's all a holistic reality, right? So this Eser Sfiros are, by definition, by their essence, they are a holistic entity. And this is in sharp contrast to the Eser Sfiros of Tohu or Klipa, where it's not holistic at all. Everything is independent, which means everything is sick. Nothing functions right. Now, because of this, when we're going to talk about the Sheirosh U'Makor, we're going to talk about the source, you have to realize that we don't view any of the 400 entities or the map of the Jewish genome, which we talked about, we don't view those in independence. We have to view those in the frame of the whole genome. Why? Because they're all interlocking. And here's another interesting nuance. The roots of the tree bring nutrients into the entire tree. That's true. But the root that's several feet or meters beneath the ground is not directly linked to the branch which is on top of the tree. It comes via from one to the other. Eventually the branch, the root, will eventually suck out whatever nutrients it can from the soil, and eventually it will send it all the way to the top of the tree. That's true. But when we talk about a shaydish, we talk about a root here, we're not talking about a root which is independent, which feeds, which brings life into something which is not the same entity. Because the way to understand this from a mystical perspective, and any kind of physical example, by the way, falls short. But essentially, the highest madrega is mislabish in the lower madrega. It embodies itself in the lower level. So we have, imagine each level it's the same thing coming lower and lower and lower and lower. Think of a very wide bandwidth, and the very wide bandwidth contains within it something which is a little bit smaller. But then that contains within it something a little smaller. So think of 400 circles, and the little dot on the bottom ultimately is at the epicenter of the largest circle on the top. They're all, each one, it's like a spiral, but a spiral that's getting smaller and smaller, like a spring, like a coil. It starts off very large, and then it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. But it's not really going down. It's all like one entity. So each one, it's like taking a very deep, profound idea and taking that idea and conveying it into a reality it seems outside of the way where this idea flourishes or this originates. We're taking the idea and putting it to a lower level, but it's the same idea.
Is it like a circle?
It's like a circle. Circle is a very good metaphor. We have something called igulim. This is a favored metaphor or shape in Kabbalistic literature. So let's talk about Shlomo HaMelech being the wisest of people. So what's so great about Shlomo? He could speak Shleishis Halaf and Mashal. The Shlomo HaMelech can give 3,000 stories. Okay, so he was a great writer. So he was very had imagination. Like, what's so great about saying 3,000 stories? But the answer is, he didn't say 3,000 stories. He could take every idea and relate it to 3,000 levels. He understood level 1, level 2, level 3. He was able to envision how to take an idea and explain it perfectly to 3,000 different people who would be on 3,000 different levels, each one a little bit lower than the first. But it's the highest idea that ultimately is embodied in the lowest idea. It's not like there is an idea out there that gets a little vitality from a higher idea that sends vitality in this direction. No, the higher idea is mitlabesh. It embodies itself or becomes enclosed, enmeshed in a lower idea. It becomes conveyed, and each convention, it keeps going lower and lower and lower. So madrega to madrega, mushal to mushal, parable to parable, metaphor to metaphor. Each one represents a different level. And because of this, when we say the root source, we're going to trace the root source back. We're not saying that there is a root somewhere which is sending vitality to a neshama somewhere else, but rather everything is interlocking. Everything is ultimately one. This is a bit of a preface. Now we're going to go into the actual body of the Tanya. So we're in Perikut Ches, chapter 18, I guess towards the bottom third of the page. No, you're on the right page. That's good. Says the Alter Rebbe, so after we mapped out the Jewish genome, and after we found out that it's very possible that our neshama comes from Malchus, the Asiya, which is level number 400, the bottom of the totem pole. We may be on the bottom. I don't know. It's very possible. The Rebbe is the Chachma Datzilus, and we are Malchus, the Malchus Asiya, maybe. But nonetheless, it says the Alter Rebbe, despite all of the fact that this neshama is at a very low madrega, that it's a nefesh, the Malchus Asiya. Right? Let's add one more thing, that within our 400 levels, let's not forget that there's also something else. That there's also the concept of nefesh, ruach, neshama, chay yechida. Right? Nefesh, ruach, neshama, at least not on. It means a nefesh can be expressing itself not only either through neshama level, or it filters through ruach, or it filters through nefesh. Nefesh is the lowest. Right? So really, it's not 400. In actuality, it's 400 times 3. So we could be at the lowest madrega of 1,200 different, the Jewish genome of 1,200 different levels, I mean the lowest level of the 1,200th level, lowest level, right? We're talking about Malchus of Malchus Asiya, Nefesh the Nefesh of Malchus Asiya. The madrega atachtena shebekdush Asiya. Since you're in the page, so to speak, you're in the book, you're part of that Esses Fides, you're part of that system, that massive, magnificent gestalt, which is called Neshamas Yisrael, Klal Yisrael, the Esses Fides, Hiklula Mikulan. The Esses Fides are all interlocking. None of them is actually independent or different or separate on its own. It's not separate from Chachma Dasiya. So the level of Chachma Dasiya is connected to the level of Malchus Dasiya. Chachma is the highest level of the Esses Fides. Malchus is the lowest level of the Esses Fides. The lowest level of the Esses Fides is connected to the highest level of the Esses Fides. They're not mutually exclusive. Because everything is interlocking, we said. It's not like Klipa, where everything is an I and my. That's iPhone and MySpace. That's the opposite. That's Klipa. But we're talking about in Kedusha, we're talking about something which is us. There is no I and my. So there is no yeshus, so to speak. There's no arrogance. There's no self-focus. It's all selfless focus. In other words, the concept of bittul. This is bittul, where bittul comes in. Bittul is selflessness. Selflessness means, and it's not about me. It's about us. When you have a team and each player is worried about being the most valuable player, you have a disaster of a team. When you have a team where no player thinks about being the most valuable player, but our team winning, then we have a team that functions very well, a team that will win. Why? Because they're a team. They know that by being together, they can achieve more. Now, of course, it's very important for us to point out that this is possible outside of the realm of Kedusha. People can decide to be a team. They can decide we want to accomplish something, and therefore it's not going to be about us. We're going to focus on the greater good that we believe in, and we're going to be able to renounce self and focus on only what is loftier, higher, and transcendent of our individual needs, of our individual requirements or likes or desires. This is very nice in theory, and it could actually work in a very small way. In a small way, if everybody could stay focused, it actually could work to some degree. But the problem is, the larger the bandwidth grows, the more difficult it becomes. Because there's something that unites us, but that something is not all pervasive. And because it's not all pervasive, the moment you step outside of that something, all of a sudden we're pulling in different directions. So communism kind of worked in the kibbutz. It kind of worked. It doesn't work anymore, but it kind of worked. Why? Because everybody really believed in this idea of a nascent Jewish state, and they were going to kill themselves and do whatever it could. It wasn't about them, but it's about a higher thing. And there's not going to be any politics, and everybody's going to have the exact same life, and so on and so forth. Okay, so for a limited amount of time, fueled by a certain ideology and imagination, people were able to put themselves aside. How long did that last? And did it last outside of the parameter of what they were focused on? The answer is no, it couldn't. It couldn't. Why not? Because these aren't intrinsic things. Intrinsically, by nature, we all care about number one. Nobody has to go to a Hasidus class and be mizboinen, go into deep contemplation of why I care about myself. That's what I mean, why do you care? That's nature. That's who I am. Okay, but we could be educated or brought into an ideology which says it's not about you. We should think about something greater and bigger. Okay, fine, greater and bigger. But then, in the little voice in the person's head says, greater and bigger. So what's in it for me? Why do I care greater and bigger? What's in it for me? So for a time, a person could be convinced that he's going to be part of the great sweep of history, and that the future generations will know. His children will be able to look back and say, my Saba was a founder, and he built the state, and he is the one who... Okay, it's very nice. So as long as it focuses on that thing, as long as I can see my own selfish needs fulfilled, I can still focus in a selfless way. But the moment we step outside of those lines, and invariably we will step outside of those lines because they're not real, they're not true, they're not intrinsic. They're adopted realities. They cannot compete with the natural reality. The natural reality is more powerful than the adopted realities. What happens? We pull apart. What happened in the communist revolution? And a short while later, they were killing each other. Stalin killed Trotsky. Why? Because the need to build a communist utopian society, it's the biggest joke, but or it's a bad joke actually, a disaster, a horrible stain on humanity of the 20th century, but the need to be able to build that was not as great as Stalin's need and desire to be the leader, the party secretary. So Trotsky got in the way. So he injected a bullet in his brain, and life was fine and good for Stalin. And then he killed thousands, according to estimates, actually millions of people. Why? Because they got in the way of his ideology. So communism became not the utopia, but an absolute hell. We say in our davening, "V'yasu kulam aguda achas," that we should all become one band. Lasei setzoincha, to do your will, because the only thing that really unites us is Yiddishkeit. And this is like what I spoke about yesterday. Is with the whole idea of us being like sheep is that the only thing that really unites us is our sheep-like reality, where we are Hashem's sheep. If we could be Hashem's sheep, then we can actually manage to get along. If we can put all the narishkeit that's dividing us on the side and say, okay, here's what we do care about. We all care about more mitzvahs. We all care about more holiness. We all care about Am Yisrael being closer to Hashem. Okay, if we can agree to care about that, then we can actually, that is actually natural. That's what we're going to talk about here. That is actually who we are. So because that is actually who we are, that's kind of engaging a different nature. There's the selfish nature, then there's the selfless nature, but both are nature for a Yid. So because you're engaging the nature of a Yid, you can actually overcome that. But outside of Torah and mitzvahs, there is nothing which will ever be able to truly unite us in a permanent basis. It will only be a temporary kind of unison.
You could use the selfish nature to get that reality.
You could use the selfish nature to some degree. But the point of the ahava that we're going to talk about here, this ahava is not a rational ahava. It's not built by virtue of education or ideology. It's built by nature. It's created by nature. Nature is something that we do without knowing why, like a reflex. The doctor hits your knee and your knee jerks forward and you don't know why. You don't have to know why. That's nature. Your body functions a certain way. Why? It's nature. You're selfish. You want to be self-preservation. Why? You have to go to school to learn about survival? nobody needs to be taught about survival. Maybe you learn how to survive, but the desire for survival is universal. Where does it come from? It's nature. Well, guess what? The desire to be Hashem's sheep is also universal. For Yidden, it's part of us. Since it's part of us, the rest of the world, don't expect any unity there. There's never real unity. The only true unity that it could ever be is the inyan of Klal Yisrael. That's why it says when the Jewish people stood at Har Sinai, it says that they were ki ish echad, belev echad, one person with one heart. But when the Egyptians were pursuing us, it says they pursued us belev echad, ki ish echad, with one heart, like one person. The obvious question is, what's the difference? How come you always say ki ish echad, belev echad, like one person with one heart, and here we emphasize it with one heart, like one person? Because the question is, what is intrinsic? What is nature, and what are we actually doing? So when the Jewish people were at Har Sinai, it was ki ish echad. We really and truly are one, and that oneness expressed itself in our desire to receive the Torah, belev echad. But when the Egyptians pursued us, what were they united by? Their hatred for us. So they're not really one. First came belev. The lev was filled. The hearts were filled with hatred. Because the hearts are filled with hatred, what did that lead them to? It led them to be ish echad. But as long as their object of hatred was there, they could find unity. The moment the object of hatred isn't there anymore, they don't like to unite them. They're not united at all. So it's not an intrinsic thing. That's an acquired or developed thing. And therefore, I'm not going to say it's fraudulent, but it has no lasting power. It's only real in a certain reality. That's why this monster, butcher dictator of Syria, Yimach Shemai Assad, he just announced that Israel is our greatest enemy. Really? Israel's your greatest enemy? The guy's fighting for survival. He's got ISIS around his neck. It's not bothering him. Why is Israel's greatest enemy? What's he trying to do? He's trying to somehow curry favor to create unity in whatever remnants he has left of the country that he inherited from his father. So how do you do that? Let's find something common to hate. And once we find something common to hate, then we can be unified.
But that isn't their nature.
Is their nature to hate?
Or part of it?
The nature of self-preservation is far more powerful than the nature of hating. And the nature of hating ultimately boils down to self-preservation and selfishness. Because I think somebody's taking something away from me, and he's made my life bad, so he becomes my scapegoat. But it all boils down to the same thing. It's all about selfishness. It's all about me. So if somebody would be convinced that actually it's in his best interest not to hate this person, I don't hate him then. But for a Yid, the idea of real Ava, real love, real unity is that we actually are able to love and care about our fellow, even if it means that it comes off our account.
That's our nature.
That's our nature. That's our nature. Now, that nature oftentimes remains latent, concealed, buried, undeveloped, but it's still there. And that's exactly what Alter Rebbe is going to say over here. Why is it still there? Because even though you're at the lowest ebb of this genome, and even though you're nefesh, the nefesh of Malchus, Asiya, right? So we have these Esesphiris, and we have these four worlds, and these four worlds, and we have this idea of nefesh, the nefesh ruach neshama, and the nefesh ruach neshama itself. There's neshama, the neshama, and there's ruach the neshama, and nefesh the neshama, and then other three levels. I don't know. We're like 2,500 levels already now, as we keep making the calculations, right? So this huge genome that keeps developing as we keep creating these subcategories. So nonetheless, even the neshama at the lowest level, but toicha in it is melubish chachma the malchus datzilus. It has to have the chachma of malchus datzilus. If it's the lowest level of asiya, so the lowest level of asiya, which is malchus, and even if it's nefesh, the malchus daasiya, so ultimately it still has to have in it the neshama, the ruach, because if it's nefesh, the nefesh, within the nefesh is ruach, within the ruach is neshama, and that comes from malchus. But within the malchus is yisoid, within the yisoid is hayd, and netzach goes all the way back to chachma, with the concept of the world of asiya. But the world of asiya didn't come out of by itself. The world of asiya is engendered by the world of bria. The world of bria is engendered by the world of yitzira. The world of atzilus, which is all comes from malchus of atzilus. Malchus da atzilus is engendered by what? By chachma da atzilus. So the end of this totem pole, within it, is melubash through many levels. Ultimately, the highest level of divinity of created reality, which is chachma da atzilus. So a yid who's in the level of nefesh, the malchus, the asiya, has within him also still a spark of Chachma, the Neshama, the Atzilus.
But the toe is still connected to the head. It won't move unless it's got a portion of that head.
Correct. And that's why the Alter Rebbe talks about in the second chapter, the idea of being connected to a tzaddik. And he talks about exactly that's why he's Reish B'nai Yisrael. Exactly so. And all neshamas are interconnected. Sheba in Chochma Atzilus is Meir Eiden Seif Baruch Hu Mamish. That's where the infinitude of God resonates and reveals itself Mamish in the most literal of levels. Here the Alter Rebbe says, this is alluded to in the scripture, the pasuk in Mishle that says, Hashem b'chochma yosad oretz. So oretz is the idea of malchus. Malchus is always the concept of oretz. That's earth. So soil, that comes from malchus. And Hashem b'chochma yosad oretz. So one way of understanding Hashem b'chochma, that God created everything in a very smart way. Everything is very smart, and the world is there's a brilliant system that has the whole world interlocking. And that's really fascinating and cool. Very nice. So that's one understanding of it. But that's how the Sepharno explains it, not pasuk. But the Ibn Ezra explains it. We'll get to that a bit later, in a different way. That this idea of b'chachma yasad eretz. Let's talk for now with the way the Alter Rebbe is explaining it. His b'chachma yasad eretz means that it's chachma that's invested in eretz. How did eretz come about? Eretz means malchus. Where did malchus come from? Malchus only come from all of the madregas, the highest levels, up to the level of chachma. Eretz means earth. But metaphorically, eretz or earth, soil, represents malchus, the lowest common denominator.
Okay.
It all boils down to the earth. You came from the earth, you go back to the earth, soil. Without soil, you can't survive. It's the foundation of everything, bedrock. And it says, "V'kulam b'chachma sisa." Everything's made with wisdom. Again, it's a simple understanding of everything is made wisely. The world is a very wise, brilliant infrastructure. But that's not the point here. On a deeper level, it's talking about the madrega, the level of malchus, of chachma, pardon me. So what comes out? So we find ourselves then, now we understand, ki ein seif baruch hu melubash bebechinas chachma shebenefesh ha'adam, that the infinitude of the divine, the essential of the divine energy, embodies itself where? In the chachma shebenefesh ha'adam, in the highest level of a yid, the highest level of consciousness. Which level of consciousness is that? That's the level of chachma. So since the level of chachma has to be the heir to all of the previous madregas, that means within the level of chachma, as it resides in the actual nefesh of a person. So inside that, in that is also melubash, the highest levels, until we talk about chachma datzilus. And chachma datzilus is a vehicle, a convention, an envelope for divinity itself. Why is Chachma an envelope for divinity? Because Chachma is bittul. The person who truly is wise is the person who's truly humble. Arrogance doesn't come from wisdom. Arrogance comes from opinions, comes from midas. I feel this, I feel that. But the person who's looking for true wisdom doesn't care if I got the wisdom or you got the wisdom. Who cares? Oh, I was wrong. Who cares? It's not about me. It's about wisdom. All I want is wisdom. So it doesn't matter where the wisdom came from. The main thing is I got wisdom. Oh, this teacher's not nice to me. He doesn't smile to me. He doesn't take time. I don't care. I just want chachma. I don't care if the teacher's a block of wood. If I get chachma, I'm interested in chachma. It's not about me. This is about the chachma. Do I get the chachma or do I not get the chachma? So chachma is totally transcendent of self. It's not me. Who's me? And what is the word chachma made up of? In Hebrew, everything is very meaningful. Even the etymology of the word is made up of koach ma. What's ma? Ma what? Like ma nishtana. Power of what? Where do ideas come from? Ideas come out of duress, pressure, necessity. But where do they come out of? You slowly build an idea. Let me see how build it. So take a little this, a little that, slowly putting it together until it took me a few hours, and I finally slowly put an idea together. Ridiculous. Where do ideas come from? In a flash. And they come in a flash. It's called an epiphany. An explosion of light. Where did that light come from? I don't know. There's this well of ideas inside me, this power of chachma that emotes, that's the wrong word, that intuits ideas. Ideas just come out of nowhere. So that's the idea of bittul. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was challenged by Korach, he said about him and Aaron, he says, what do you want? What do you want from us? He said, Vanachnu ma. We are but nothing. We are bittul. It's not about us. We're not politicians. We're not here to develop ourselves. This is all with the Eibush. We're totally subservient. We're transparent. There's no ego whatsoever. Moshe says, I don't care at all. I never think about myself for 1 second. It's only about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what do you want from us? Why are you making a rebellion? So this idea of anachnu ma, this concept of bittul, that's the idea of chachma. And because it's bittul, that's why it's a receptacle for godliness. Because the moment you have something which is on its own, separate from godliness, in that moment already you don't have the concept of true transparency. It's not transparent, and you're not getting the wisdom in the purest way. You're getting the wisdom adulterated or colored or shaded by this particular personality. In Drasha Saran, one of the principles he talks about is why is it that Moshe Rabbeinu had a hard time speaking? He was not articulate. He was not eloquent. Like Moshe Rabbeinu is the greatest teacher of all time. Why wouldn't Hashem give him eloquence? Why wouldn't he give him a beautiful way to speak? And he said, Drasha Saran says, because if Moshe Rabbeinu was eloquent, then it would be Moshe Rabbeinu's eloquence, not the magnificence of God's word. So therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu's personality would get in the way. It will become about Moshe Rabbeinu, his talent, his ability to convey and communicate ideas rather than the ideas themselves. So therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu was transparent. It was not about Moshe Rabbeinu. So they would say, oh, did you hear Moses? That was amazing. Yeah, that was, you heard Moses. But nobody said Moses was amazing because he wasn't amazing. He wasn't an amazing speaker. What did they say? The ideas were amazing. Ideas are amazing. So most people, it's not just the idea, it's the way they say it that's meaningful and effective. Most people, b'chlal, not shaykh to understand Chachma in a pure way. They fall asleep. It doesn't keep them awake. So a good teacher will have to be eloquent, will have to be dynamic, will have to be interesting. Otherwise, you lose everybody. Everybody falls asleep. So that's not a good teacher, right? That's true. That's why it says Shmuel b'deirei. Moshe Rabbeinu Shmuel was like Moshe, and it says that Shmuel b'deirei is k'Moshe b'deirei, and Yiftach was a very simple person, born out of very low circumstances. He was like Shmuel b'deirei. Yiftach ultimately was like Moshe. Like, you couldn't find a greater disparity. This is Mivcha Min HaNushal, like the Rambam calls him, the most perfect specimen of humanity. And Yiftach is a person who didn't even know who his father is. Like the lowest of the low. He had some charisma. He was a leader. He had leadership qualities. How'd you put them on the same thing? And the Gemara says further, V'Shmuel b'deirei shel Yiftach lo hiyanech shel l'klum. Not only Yiftach was like Shmuel in his generation. Had Shmuel lived in Yiftach's generation, he would have been a nobody. He would have had no influence. How could that be? Shmuel Araya, the prophet and everything. And he's like Moshe Aaron in some ways. He would have been nothing in the generation of Yiftach. Yeah, because the generation of Yiftach could not relate to the truth. Truth, they were allergic to it. He told them truth. Went right over their head. Didn't even hear anything. Like our generation. So what do you need? You need the Yiftachs. You didn't need Moshe, you need Yiftachs in the generation. What was Yiftach? A powerful, charismatic leader, an eloquent. That's what you need. In other words, you got to get the message across. Moshe Rabbeinu, here's the Tzir Neman, he's the loyal, that's the link. The original link has to be a link that's totally self-effaced. Because otherwise, Judaism is based on somebody's charisma. Judaism is based on somebody's dynamism. That's no good. If that's the foundation of Judaism, it's based on a person, chas v'shalom, we end up worshiping a person. Chas v'shalom, not worshiping Hashem. Now, in subsequent generations, nobody has to worry about them getting worshipped, at least not for Jewish people. If you want to sell that to the Gentile world, you could sell that. They sold it very well. It's the greatest marketing plan. It was only recently overtaken by a different Jewish boy named Facebook. But before that, the greatest marketing plan was Paul. He sold this great idea. He told everybody that a man could actually be a god. It didn't work for the Jews. The Jews were not buying it. Why? Because they're cynical people. Jews they respect nobody. They look down at everybody. You're never going to sell it to them. To the world, it's easy to sell. Right? So therefore, we'd have no worries. Moshe Rabbeinu was the only one that actually was a worry. If we know where he's buried, they'll make him into a god, chas v'shalom. So nobody knows where Moshe is buried. Obviously, in the subsequent generations of Torah teachers, the teacher had to be, there's no point in being aloof. What are you gaining? You have to be able to convey. You have to be able to connect. If you're not connecting, you're not getting to the people. You're not teaching them Torah. You understand? When that goes, this is all just like metaphoric circles, but just trying to explain to you about the idea of bittul. Moshe Rabbeinu is the true vanachnuma. That's why it says Anav Mikalad Mishapnei Adam, the humblest, the most humble of people. So now comes out that Ein Seif Baruch Hu, that the infinitude of God is Maluma Shechachma, because Chachma is bittul. Chachma, the highest level of Atzilus, ultimately makes its way into the Chachma of the lowest world, of Asiya. And Chachma of Asiya ultimately is connected to Eretz, which is Malchus, the lowest Madrega of that world. So go through all these worlds, the worlds in spiral and spiral and spiral, till you come down to Nefesh, the Malchus, the Asiya. And guess what? Within that, if you trace it back, if you go into its core essence, what will you find if you keep digging and digging and digging and digging and digging? Somewhere deep down in the recess of that soul, the pretty dark soul, you would find this point of incredible light.
The truth has to be in everything.
The truth is there. That's the Chachma, that's it. So now we know who we really are. You understand? Now the begin of Chachma, begin of Chachma Sheba, made and saved Baruch Hu Melubish Ba, Mispashet is B'chol Bechinas Nefesh Kula. It's not just at the epicenter. That's a mistake. It actually permeates the entirety. The entirety of the gestalt of the Jewish people is ultimately permeated with this idea of Chachma, which is Bechinas Reisha ad Bechinas Ragla. From the highest levels until the very lowest levels, it permeates. It's found throughout. It's like the DNA of a person could be seen in every single drop of saliva. The whole genome could be mapped out by a single cell, because every cell has the whole genome in it. So therefore, our neshama may come from the lowest ebb of the Jewish genome, but within it is the entire genomic system.
Where does the 600,000 souls come into this if there's only 400 or 1,200?
Or 2,500 or 3,000. But the reality is that there are 600,000 root souls. Many of the souls are kindred. There are not 600,000 organs in the body. It's 248 organs in the body. The Jewish people like a great body, 248 organs and limbs, not even organs, limbs, and 365 sinews. So that's what the Jewish people are. You only get 613. How do you get to 600,000? Because within the heart, there's a whole subatomic structure full of cells. And each one of those cells is made up of little cells. They're all interlocking. Understand? Now, this comes to the idea, the chesiv, this is the meaning of ha-chochma techaya ba'aleha, that wisdom enlivens or animates or activates its master. So the Sefarno says, a society that has ability, wisdom, can survive. How could you survive? Because they're smart. Smart people can survive. Stupid people, their society sinks. But Ibn Ezra says no. Chachma is the tzudas haneshama, says the Ibn Ezra. And that's what the Alter Rebbe refers to over here. He says, Chachma techaya, the core essence, where does the life of the neshama really come from? Whatever nefesh, the malchus, the asiyah that you have, where does the life come from? Life is godliness. Where does the divinity come from? From Chachma. So Chachma techaya ba'aleh. Because you are all possessed this level of Chachma, that's what gives us life. That what makes us exist. And here we finish off in the brackets. Sometimes great sinners can bring forth a very high soul, which is be'imke klipa, is a soul which got stuck in the lowest klipa, like it says in the book of reincarnation. So basically, very nuanced and difficult concept, but we're late. So I'm going to try to compress it into 3 minutes. Sometimes you have a very high neshama, and the very high neshama did very, very bad things in this world. And because it did such bad things, it descended, it self-descended, self-imploded from the level of some level of atzilus. It could have put itself in the lowest level of asiyah. Now the klipa is not like a conscious thing. It's like a nature. The klipa grabs it, the klipa doesn't let go of it. It's not going to let go. It's just like there are certain chemical reactions in the body. You know, I'll give you an example. There's a certain condition certain women have when they get pregnant. The body identifies the pregnancy as a foreign object, and the body kills it like a bacteria. And these women never have many miscarriages, right? So when they figure out what this is, then they're able to sort of to use chemically mutate that negative energy in the body so that it shouldn't do it. Right? You're playing with it. So what did you sat the chemical structure of the body down in the classroom and explained to them why this is a stupid thing to do, why they're hurting themselves? Right? Or for a person with things like AIDS or SARS, which are, the body gets enraged in a certain way and the body goes crazy. The body doesn't know what it's doing. So the body is like an allergy. The body's producing hormones, or the body's producing saliva, but it doesn't need it. The body's fighting. It's fighting an imaginary infection. So in these kind of realities, we're dealing with a concrete reality. The Eibishter created a concrete spiritual reality. So the klipa, once it gets a hold of a neshama, it doesn't let go of it. How could it? It's not. The klipa is built to hold on to this. That's the black hole that holds on to these neshamas. So how are you going to get the neshama out of there? So God can do whatever he wants. Okay, fine. That's not the point here. There's a system. So the way it is in a system, who takes neshamas out of klipa? Peishi Yisrael. People who themselves live in a world of klipa. So sometimes Hashem decides that this very high neshama has to get out of klipa. It has to be released. It's got to get a new chance. But the only way it's going to be able to be released is if it comes through Pesha Yisrael. Comes because they're the only ones who access that soul. So, but ultimately, every soul is connected. It's all connected. So, how could it be that the neshama of Pesha Yisrael is able to connect to this neshama, which really it's stuck in Klippa, but really comes from Chachma the Atzilus? How? Very simple. Because even the lowest neshama of Pesha Yisrael also has in him Chachma the Atzilus. So it's all coming out. It's all within.
It goes down, can't come up.
Unless you pull it out from below. So that's why sometimes great tzaddikim came out of circumstances which were very, very questionable, or even terrible realities, come from terrible parents. The Jewish people begin that way. Avraham Avinu's neshama comes into this world through terach, a mass idolater. Like it says, lahaitzi tar min hatamei, to take purity out of impurity. So this is the reality. And sometimes people say, he has a low birth. It doesn't mean anything. Sometimes a low birth, the lowest neshama, could come into be the most remarkable kind of, it could be a holy soul, and who knows where that will be. A few years ago, I got a call from somebody. The person said, I'll finish with this little story. The person said to me, there's a young lady, Jewish girl, and she shacked up with the Jamaican guy, and she had a baby now. Baby's Jewish. She knows the baby has to have a bris. She's too ashamed to go anywhere. Nobody's going to help her. Could you arrange a bris in your chauffeur? Jewish baby, arrange a bris, no problem. The father said he doesn't care. He understands that the mother believes the child is Jewish. He's not going to get in the way. Okay. I don't know. I think you were here. It was the Shachris after one morning, and I got to arrange with the male, and he came over here, and obviously the father can't hold the baby. There was no family. She came by herself. So I held the baby, and I'm holding this little Jamaican boy. Looks like but he's Jewish, a little Jewish Jamaican boy, right? I'm holding this boy, and it was just when Obama got elected president. And I was thinking to myself, could anybody have predicted that a guy like Obama will be president? Parents were living in wedlock. The whole thing was crazy. Like, the guy came out of nowhere, right? But forget about it. Do like Obama. Don't like Obama. It's not important in his politics that you like him or don't like him. His success is extraordinary. It shows you never really know. All the people born with silver spoons in their mouth, they're still in the Wharton School of Business, so they're making money. But they didn't become the president. This guy, came out of nowhere. I'm holding this baby. I'm thinking, who knows? Maybe this is like some super holy neshama that had to come out of this weird situation where Jewish girl just, kind of had a friend with benefits from a totally like the other, and who knows? So maybe he'll be a big tzaddik someday. I don't know. This is my thoughts. I'm holding this baby. We just never know. Why? Because ultimately, all the neshamas, from the lowest neshamas to the highest neshamas, they're all connected. They're all in the system. And as long as you're in that system, it's like chutes and ladders. You keep moving up and down. You can go. The highest neshama can end up in the lowest place, and the lowest neshama can end up in the highest place. And when you learn this, when you learn Chassidus, and then you talk about outreach, and then you talk about touching another Yid, you understand it's not about making a Yid frum. It's not about kiruv. Who are you to be mekarev? Maybe that person's really started off much higher than you. You understand that we're all in this together. So knowing the root system, knowing how this works, is not just nice, because now we have an understanding of the deepness of the concept. Knowing how this works is actually, it's transformative. It's transformative at the way we learn to look at another Yid. It's transformative in the way we learn to view the bigger picture of Klal Yisrael. It's transformative of the way we're motivated to live lives of caring and sharing, to live lives of inclusion and lives of focus on trying to bring out the best from every single Yid, rather than lives of harsh judgment and putting people down and so on and so forth.